Not to use cliches, but those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it, and that's been used many, many times. And that's true. In American history, this is still the greatest country in the world, but it's also the greatest experiment in governing in the history of the world. And we're still figuring it out, right? 250 years later. When you talk about trucking history, it's important to remember where the country was and then where it is now, and how trucking has evolved and been certainly a big contributor to so many advances in American history. Rural America in the 1800s, and using the horse and carriage, or horse and buggy, or horse and wagon to get their produce to the neighbors, into town, exchanging, either bartering or getting paid for their produce. When Henry Ford started making vehicles that were motor carriers, wow, this might help farmers being able to take what Henry Ford had produced as a car and then put produce in it and get things off the farm quicker or farther. That really helped moving into the 20th century. And so you talk about the early 20th century and what happened in the 1920s. We get into the Great Depression. The economy is crashed. After the Depression, or just as we were getting out of it, somebody decided that they could invent something that would put an air conditioning unit on a truck. His name is Frederick McKinley Jones. He's in the Hall of Fame at ATHS. He was 20 years old. He was a mechanic and worked part-time as a custodian. And he was also African American, which is important to the American story, because in 1937, African Americans were not necessarily treated very well, and they certainly were not listened to in business. No one would have said, yes, you have a great idea. The president of the company, who had lost an entire load of chickens going from an Indianapolis area up to the stockyards in Chicago, said, give it a shot. And Frederick McKinley Jones came out with the first refrigeration unit for a truck. It was too big and too heavy, but then let's change that part, let's cut a few inches off here, and it worked. And you think about getting the economy out of the Great Depression, that is as big a factor as any, that you were able to now get my produce, you mean not just to the next town from my farm in southern Illinois? No, cross country. And it's not going to spoil. It's not going to spoil. And I think that revolutionized things. We've always been able to adopt it. We've always been able to adapt. My father was a World War II veteran. I'm very proud of that. And I think a lot of people who are probably listening to this had fathers or grandfathers or even great-grandfathers who fought in World War II. But the three major trucking companies all voluntarily agreed to give up making vehicles for commercial use, for the public, just to make war vehicles. Anybody that's ever seen those old newsreels, hundreds of trucks going into the mountain to either get iron ore and then coming back down full, or the trees for paper products, and they're just full coming back down the mountain. And then you see the trucks that transported those who had been drafted or had enlisted to wherever they had to go for deployment. And then once over in the European theater, the Pacific theater, just the vehicles that the truck companies manufactured were just better than the other side. It's pretty simple to say trucking had a lot to do with winning World War II and changing for the Allied forces and changing world history that way. I don't think that's too much of a stretch. So when the roads got better, trucking got more important. When 1957, President Eisenhower signed the Interstate Highway Act, and this became, again, revolutionized trucking, because now we're easier able to get across country from north to south, from east to west, and do so in a more efficient manner, quicker. And it coincided with boom of the post-war economy that's led into the 1960s. Before OOIDA came about, the independent drivers really didn't have much of a voice. You had to be a union driver. You had to be with a particular company to really have a lot of the same rights. I think that's the most important thing, that now we have somebody who represents us. The chaos you see sometimes on cable news networks is not what keeps America going. It's what goes on in those committee meetings and testimonies. And to have OOIDA be the voice of those independent owners and operators, I think that they now have a strong, at least people know who OOIDA are. The staff and of the legislators, they know what OOIDA is, they know who the people are, and I think that's very important. And again, the fact that you think about how trucking's changed, how America's changed since 1973, and OOIDA is still strong and is still important, and it just gives people who want to get into the profession or need to get into the profession, that gives them so many more options and so many more. This makes it a really good job as opposed to just a job I have to go to. I think that's where OOIDA is really still so important and has been now for that many years. And I gave a tour to a high school course. I just mentioned that you don't have to go back any farther than 5 years ago or now 6 years ago. Early on in the COVID crisis, you walked into the grocery store with a mask on and the store shelves were empty. Why was that? Is somebody incompetent? I want to see the manager, right? No, the trucks are parked. We've had to stop trucking until we figure this out. We don't know who can load. We don't know who can load at the other end. We don't know if we can have two drivers, only one. We'll get it figured out. And then when everything got figured out and the truck started moving again, magically the store shelves were full. So, I mean, I think people who had forgotten that trucking is so important to America, America's economy, and American history, they remembered that. Trucking history is rich, and as is obviously American history. And when you talk about inventions, innovations, when you think about pop culture, to this day, anybody over the age of 50, certainly, if you say something about Smokey and the Bandit, they know what you're talking about, right? And so you look at that, and that's pop culture. The song Convoy reached #1 in the country at the height of the CB radio craze in America, and it was and there was TV shows and other movies. Chris Christopherson died a couple of years ago, and what a guy he was. And we've got his poster over there from Convoy, the movie. Man, you go, that's still good stuff, and it's still the drivers are still like that. You know, they're their own men in their own way, and yet they make this incredible service to the country.
America has been built by people willing to answer the call. From the earliest freight wagons to today's highways, truckers have kept this nation moving through times of prosperity, uncertainty, and everything in between. They've hauled food to our tables, medicine to our hospitals, supplies to our soldiers, and hope to communities when they need it the most. Long before the sun comes up, long after the lights go out, America keeps moving because truckers do. The trucks may have changed, the roads may have changed, but the spirit has not. The spirit of independence, of resilience, of showing up no matter the miles ahead. As America celebrates 250 years, we honor the people whose hands have helped build it. One load, 1 mile, one generation at a time. Behind every strong nation are the people who keep it moving. Today, that's America's truckers. And today, that's you.